Welcome to D's Practice Pod. I am your host. My name is Andy Rykowski. I'm the president of the D-Rye Institute of Drums and Percussion Incorporated. That's my school. And I go by the stage name D-Rye. As those of you who frequent this effort know, this is a podcast about drumming and other musical subject matter, where I invite primarily drummers to join me and talk about their experiences in the drumming and musical worlds. On January 7th, 2020, Neil Peart, the drummer of Rush, passed away at the age of 67. I cannot express how much his body of work influenced me as a young player and continued to inform my creative decisions as a seasoned performer. I know I am nowhere near alone in this, so I've decided to dedicate a podcast episode in which I have invited friends who are like-minded to share their thoughts, their memories, and experiences of the professor, as he was often called. I hope you enjoy this episode and take away from it the good feelings of celebrating this very unique person who you never needed to meet face to face to understand as a human being and appreciate as an artist. And now, to the podcast. There we go. Okay. My first guest for the Neil Peart Tribute podcast is Joe Crocilla. Joe is an accomplished player. He's also one of my students from back in the Long Island Drum Center days. And we're here to talk Rush. We're here to talk Neil and what he has meant to all of the people that I'm going to have on this podcast. So, hey, Joe.
Hey, Andrew. Nice to see you again.
Nice to see you again. It's been so long. So, what was your first experience with Rush?
Well, let's see. My first experience was, I've had in my kind of musical journey, I've wound up in a place where I listen to everything, like we talked about before.
As drummers do, for the most part, we're probably the most versatile listeners of music.
Yeah, you find that? That's, well,
the real good ones, let's put it that way.
Clearly the most intelligent guy in the band.
Oh, and the most handsome. We're so handsome, that's why we're surrounded by all of these things, so we don't actually eclipse the singer.
Yeah, well, I can understand that. So I think that, early in my musical development, I tended to kind of lock on to something, which made me miss other things. So while I was really into the rock thing, I kind of missed the jazz thing. And then I got into the jazz thing and kind of missed the whatever thing.
Well, we come pre-web.
Yeah.
Right? So, there wasn't the opportunity to sort of engross yourself in.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I skipped over the whole disco thing, because I was into jazz at the time or whatever. So, it was later actually with Rush. I think when I first heard Rush, Geddy's voice didn't kind of do it for me. I kind of turned an ear to it, and then...
Which is funny. I asked this question of a lot of people. Are you a fan of Led Zeppelin?
Huge.
What's the big difference between their voices?
I don't know. Who knows? Why is that girl pretty? That blonde's pretty over there, and who knows?
Yeah.
But
right.
Whatever it was, it was like we talked about earlier. I growing up in the time I did, Bob Dylan was like a force. But yeah, when I heard Dylan's voice, I just no. And it wasn't until much later that I realized that the guy was an incredible songwriter. So
that's it. There are people who are tremendous writers who don't necessarily have the most amazing voice, but their versions of songs
stylist,
still.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
And then
I'd
grow
put
to
Neil Diamond in that same category.
Well, I'll tell you, I'm Italian, so I relate everything to food. When I was a little boy, my mother would make broccoli rabe.
Yes.
And I would cry. I don't want to eat that. Hated it. I couldn't stand to look at it. Now, I can eat it until I'm exploding.
Yes.
So, music is like that with me, too.
It's good for the colon, too.
Absolutely. So
keeps it going.
The thing that got me into Rush wasn't really Geddy. I kind of
Right.
I discovered the other guys after I heard Neil.
Right.
And it wasn't until I started to delve into what he was doing that gave me an understanding. You know, it's amazing because that's, you know, I think we all have this experience. Sometimes you don't know what's there until you start to dig at it a little bit, and then you realize the reason you didn't know is because you just didn't know.
Right. It's like an archaeological expedition.
Exactly.
Do you remember what the first song was?
What was the first song? Oh, can I just digress a second?
Yes.
So, because I'm really happy to be a part of this because I've listened to all your
Right.
podcasts, and I don't really feel like I belong here because I'm
Oh,
really.
of course you do. I wouldn't have invited you if you didn't.
We're just having a drum talk, a drum chat. But you are an aficionado of Neil. As a matter of fact,
Yes.
when we decided to play Tom Sawyer in Shot Glass Nickel, I sought out your expertise to help me with the song, and that was, I think, probably the first time I really seriously looked into Neil, and I noticed some things. I'm like, wow, this is really intelligent,
Yeah.
and that's what made me discover his uniqueness, that he was. But what I wanted to say was I'm happy to be a part of this, and I think what I can bring to this little chat is for your listeners is to be a part of something to clear up, because like we talked about, you know what you know, but you don't know what you don't know.
Right.
So there's this interpretation that I would love to be able to put to rest now, speaking with a Neil aficionado.
Okay.
Is it Peart? Is it Peart? Is it Peart? Let's clear this up.
It's Peart.
It's Peart. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
From the horse's mouth, it's Peart.
Because I've over the years talked to so many drummers, and they're like, no, it's Peart. No, it's. And I said, you know what? It may be almost as difficult figuring out his drum parts as it is to figure out how to say his name.
Yes.
But
That's coming from.
There you go. All right,
him.
We've
So,
settled that
right.
age-old.
Yes.
So
I've said it all kinds of different ways too, because someone has corrected me, and when you're 12,
well, I'm happy we put.
you when you're corrected, you are corrected.
There you go.
So
So for the record, it is
Peart.
Peart.
Yes.
All right. I'm so happy to be a part of clearing that up for the. So at any rate, when we started to get into Tom Sawyer, it struck me that the song was laid out the way it was written, and the way so much of music goes, that a band moves together to build and whatever. But the thing that really stood out to me about his playing in that song was that he was really building that song piece by piece, and hence that people call him the architect and
Yes.
the
professor.
the professor, because that's what he did. He took he starts out with that groove, and just measure by measure he's adding a little of this and a little of that until he creates this whole painting. So I think that was the first thing that really kind of opened my eyes, was playing. And then you start to go, well, what else is this guy? Let me look into this a little further. And he's got that, like we talked before about, you listen to Jeff Beck, 2 notes, that's Jeff Beck.
Right.
You listen to Neil, there's, that little thing he does on the bell, that's him. There's Neil.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
he's one of those guys.
right.
May he rest in peace. And I think all of us, owe him a debt of gratitude for what he left behind.
More than I can tell you.
Yeah, I know you're.
It changed my musical world.
Yeah.
The first time I heard him.
And what was that? What was the first
The
thing
first
you heard?
song that I heard actually wasn't from their earlier catalog. Somebody told me you should check this band out, because at the time I was listening to a lot of The Police.
Yeah.
And there's another
guy. Yeah.
It's just tremendous.
Yeah.
What he does. You
Yeah.
know. And someone said, well, you better check this band Rush out, because their drummer's pretty amazing. And so I bought the one that it just hit the shelves. It was the album Signals. And I actually bought 2 albums, and it was when you're old enough, like for either Christmas or your birthday, your parents give you money instead of giving you things, because they know you're just going to go out and get what you want then, and you're not going to get ugly shirts, right?
That's before you get old enough to get socks and underwear.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
That's the stage before it.
Right, yeah. It's kind of like this whole like pyramid of
And
of
happy
gift
about
giving.
it.
Yes. But I bought two things that day. I bought Raised on Radio by Journey
Uh-huh.
Because I already liked Escape,
Yep.
so I figured I'd check it out. And then the other one was I bought Signal. So I put the Journey one on first because I already knew them. And of course, this was again the ginormous piece of furniture that was our entertainment center at the time. And it had the stem where it would drop the vinyl down one at a time. So I listened to the first side of the Journey album, and then I heard Subdivisions.
Yep, that'll do it.
And it was so completely different than anything I've ever heard that,
Did you get it?
no,
Yeah.
not at first. I was like, wow. Well, firstly, when I heard the Journey thing, I was like, this is pretty good, but I didn't see that it was all that much different than what they had on Escape, So when I listened to this, I couldn't even figure out what he was doing.
Yeah.
So I sitting there kind of slack-jawed, and I wait for the whole first side of the album, and then I pick the needle up, and I put it back down in the beginning again. I did that a number of times. Didn't even flip it over yet. To this day, I still have never listened to the second side of the Journey album.
Is that right? Wow.
As a matter, I don't even own it anymore. I traded it in at Titus Oaks years ago for CDs.
Wow.
When CD all of a sudden became the thing.
Yeah.
I'm so upset with myself to have gotten rid of a lot of the vinyl that I got rid of. But,
Yep. See,
there's
for me,
places-
that was Mahavishnu Orchestra. The first time I heard Billy Cobham,
right.
I remember putting that record on, going, "What? What is that?"
And those are the guys we're talking about. Guys that are just that unique. And Neil was
Yep.
definitely in that class of people.
Without a doubt.
But and changed the band entirely.
Yeah.
We discussed it before, from the self-titled Rush album to Fly By Night. It's an entirely different band.
Yep.
And are there particular things about his playing that you try to work into your style?
That's an interesting question. I think that, most of us, unless you're one of those guys who's just an original, and I guess, we all have to build from our influences.
Right.
But there seem to be those guys that just, bang, here I am, that, the Keith Moons and who did Keith Moon listen to? Did he, you know what I mean? But, look at what he did. Try and do that solo. What is it? Won't Get Fooled Again? Is that
Yeah.
where that solo?
Oh,
It sounds
yeah.
like he's falling down the steps.
Yes.
But man, it works,
Again, you plug that part into that part and it fits.
Yeah.
It's
So, yeah, I listen to, and you try to pick up something from everybody. And I think what I try to kind of get from Neil's playing is his patience. He has a lot of patience when he plays, I think. Where he starts in a place and where you might feel compelled to do something. He didn't do it there. You know what I mean? He did it over here, and he only gave you a taste of it. You know what I mean? And kind of exposed a little more of it.
yes.
So
I agree with you.
I dig that.
I think
about
I know
his
where
playing.
that comes from. I think it's because, he was the lyricist.
There you go.
So, if you don't want to step on
Was
the
he
singer,
the
you don't
lyricist?
want to.
For the most part, he did the lyrics.
Way over 95%.
Yeah. That's you know what I think if you ever heard an interview with him or read anything, he was a bright guy. He was an intellect.
Oh yes.
And his playing was intelligent. And it's interesting about him too because the first time I heard John Bonham, I had an image in my head
So what kind of person he was?
of something superhuman
Yeah.
because his drums sounded so big.
Big.
And when I saw him, it almost ruined it for me because he was just a guy. You know what I mean? And Neil is the same kind of a player to me. I never saw him as a good-looking drummer. When you see somebody like Yoni Madar, the guy looks like a dancer. He's just such grace and fluidity in his movement, and so I didn't get that from Neil, but his recorded stuff and his I mean, he was a composer.
Yes.
He was a drumming composer. You know, so that's
Yes.
really what I got from him. That was my takeaway from him. You know?
Yeah, I agree. I agree. The difference between what you hear and what you see.
Yeah.
I know the first time. Did you ever see them live?
No, I've seen live performances, but not
Right,
actually being
not-
there.
Yeah. I was fortunate enough to see them live
How close were you?
4 times. Well, the first 2 times was Nassau Coliseum, and I was somewhere around the middle rows of the long section.
Right.
So it's kind of for people who aren't from Nassau. It's sort of shaped like a capsule.
Yep.
You know, so the areas where you would be closer to the stage, I was there. I was close enough to see what was going on, but not so close to have gotten sweated on.
That's
Put it
good.
that way. And then the last 2 times I saw him, I had some pretty darn good seats at Jones Beach. And I saw them for the Clockwork Angels tour, which was the last time they did a studio album. So it was pretty. I didn't get a chance to see the 40th, which was their swan song.
Right.
But I came pretty close.
Yeah.
So.
And then the other thing too was his health at the end.
Well, that's just it, and he was a very private guy.
Yeah, so nobody really knew what was going on.
No, only his very close circle of folk.
And
you
he's
know.
still, it's funny because if you separate it, I mean, when he was not feeling well, you could tell by looking at him, but you couldn't tell from listening to him.
Right.
Which
Yep.
is, that's pretty impressive.
Yes.
That he could still pull it off. And, you could tell he wasn't feeling well. Did you see him on Letterman at the end when Letterman was featuring all the drummers
Yes.
toward the end of his show?
Mhm. Oh yeah.
And you could
Yeah, he had drummer week.
Yeah, and
it
he
was-
had a ton of players on.
Yes. Yeah.
Um,
I had no idea David Letterman liked drums.
he's a drum freak. Yeah.
Yeah. It's amazing. Look at that. Oh, jeez. My student just said.
Well, see, now I had the good enough sense to turn my phone off for this interview.
Oh, of course. Yeah. Well, let me see. How deep do you go in the catalog? What do you think is the most challenging part?
I guess.
I mean, that's a tall order of
yeah,
question.
it's a tall order, and I think my answer is whatever we happen to be working on at the time, because all of his stuff kind of revealed itself to me as I was trying to learn it.
Yeah.
Like you kind of hear it on the surface, and you think you have a handle on it until you start digging, and you go, "Wait a minute, that's not what it is."
Right.
So it's probably whatever we're working on. We were, like I said, before my band dissolved, we were working on. You had mentioned it before. What was it? I'm old. Help me out.
Tom Sawyer.
No, we did Tom Sawyer.
Oh.
It was the other really
The
really popular.
a Rush song.
Yeah.
Limelight.
Limelight. There you go. So Limelight. That solo at the end is something that you're going. All right, wait a second here. That's not what I thought it was. So I guess whatever you're digging into, it's like an archaeological discovery. You're going, wait a minute.
Yeah.
So that's to me that's half the fun.
Yes.
Is deciphering that stuff.
Yeah. Oh, to get back to what I said I was going to eventually circle around to. When we talked about on the previous podcast, I asked if you tried to replicate a song exactly, whether you tried to make it your own.
Yep. Ah.
This guy.
Yeah, well, that's what I was going to say.
Right. This guy
is the guy who does it.
Well, here's the thing. Firstly, everyone who's seen them knows that he could do exactly the same solo.
Yeah.
Because he actually wrote it.
It was so well thought out.
The thing is, too, when you first start playing Rush, you have to do exactly what he did.
Yeah.
Because
the song won't work.
It's well, firstly, there's a good chance if you're 12 and you're learning it, you have no idea what time signature you're even in.
Yeah.
So you can't go off-roading if you don't even know the basic architecture of the song.
Right.
So you have to parrot what he's doing,
Yeah.
you know?
I was going to say that earlier when you said that. We talked about Ian Pace, who never
Right.
played Highway Star the same way twice,
Right.
or Mitch Mitchell, who never played
Right.
Purple Haze.
Well,
the
these
same
are
way.
guys where rock and roll was still in its infancy, and these guys probably
Well,
started
they were
out
also
as jazz
well.
guys.
That's the interesting thing about Neil to me is that he almost, and the reason why he rose to that level was what made him so different was he was almost like a classical composer. You probably didn't go see Beethoven, improvise on his Fifth Symphony. Symphony. He wrote it out this way, and this is the way it was played. And if someone else was playing it, he would instruct him. That's not. This has got to be this, and this has got to be that.
Yes, and that's one of the things about.
So he wrote in a very classical way.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's the big difference between, you've heard the term close enough for jazz.
Yep.
In classical,
There's no.
you are measured by exactly how well you play what's on the page.
Yeah. No room for
You
interpretation.
do not deviate. There's
Right.
no artistic expression. It's what's there.
Right. Yeah.
So-
So that's what that was his unique
Yes.
thing.
Yeah.
And the one band you would go see, who the drummer would do exactly what he did on the record.
Yes, and the fact is that it was so complicated that it was an accomplishment to be able to do it.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
They on their on one of the docs that's about Rush, they talk about when they were doing the Hemispheres album, and when they got to La Villa Strangiato, what they were trying to do is trying to do it nonstop, one take, and they had to give up doing it. There was no way to do it.
Yeah.
So they wound up breaking it into pieces. I mean, they eventually had to play that live, so they eventually had to figure out how to do that.
Yep.
But that also, and it's not that it was hard for the sake of being hard. It was hard because they wanted to impart something, and they were not willing to compromise, rewrite it to make it easier.
Right.
They just wanted what they wanted, and they
Right.
stuck to their guns.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I mean, you think about how difficult it was for them to do that. Like you said, I mean, it was like Queen.
Yes.
Queen. Freddie Mercury would go into the studio and he would record 100, vocal tracks.
Right.
And when they performed live, the other guys weren't making up that slack.
Right.
They couldn't do what they did on the record.
Yeah.
And Rush did what they did on the record.
Right.
So that's.
And like him or don't like him, Geddy can still sing what he did
Well,
back in.
have you ever met somebody that you didn't find particularly attractive or whatever, and then at some point you go, there's something cute about that girl or whatever, and they grow on you? That's what happened with me with Rush.
That I don't know of anyone who started liking Rush just because of Geddy's voice.
No, but you grow to like it.
Yeah, it's
an acquired taste.
yes.
It's like
that's what I
it's
was-
like Scotch.
Yeah.
I drank Scotch when I was a kid. I didn't go near it for 30 years. I love it now.
You gotta get that whole area a little numb first.
Exactly.
So,
Exactly.
okay, well, you've got to get to band practice.
I do.
So I'll just throw an invitation for you to come back at some point in
My
the near
pleasure.
future.
My pleasure.
Okay, well, welcome to Dee's podcast. This is another portion of my special tribute podcast, Neil Peart. And I am talking now with Chris Milmerstadt, who I met years ago when we were both in what was then called junior high. We were in all-county jazz band together. They actually chose two drummers, and so we were there together. Met Chris's dad, the world-renowned Al Miller, teacher extraordinaire through Chris. And Chris is, by his own right, a very accomplished player, composer, all-around super brilliant guy. When Halley's Comet came around, he built his own telescope. That blew my mind. I'm telling you.
I didn't know you remembered that.
I remember a lot of things, and you've always fascinated me. You're a very smart guy. So,
thank you. Likewise.
Oh,
yeah, we go back a long way. Thanks for having me.
Yes, we do. Yes, this is fantastic. Well, one of the things, since we were two strangers thrown into the same pot, when you did the all-county program, it was only a scant few rehearsals. They were fairly long, but there was only a few of them, and you had to get to know the people in your band. So one of the things that we bonded on was Rush. I was fairly new to them at that point, and completely blown away and enamored by what I had heard, and was very happy to hear that my friend here was also a fan. So
I got the bug early.
Yes, and we and the keyboard player played Subdivisions during one of the rehearsals. I remember.
Well, you got a better memory than I do.
Well, there's ask me where my keys are, though. I have no clue.
Oh, right.
I'm good for the long game, and the short-term memory is, like a light switch.
Okay.
But
I'm with you.
Okay, so
yeah, it was that I got into them maybe a year or two prior to that.
Right,
based on our
as did I.
Time.
What was the first album of theirs that you got?
The first that I heard, not that I got, but first I heard was probably Fly By Night of all things. I remember listening to it on a cassette tape on a I guess it was a band trip.
Right.
And being it's quite taken with that. But the first album that I would say was my go-to album that I really kind of sunk my teeth into was Exit Stage Left.
Oh, that's a good one.
That wasn't my first album, meaning it had already come out.
Right. Yes.
But that's my first that I really say I knew inside out and wore the grooves out, to use an old term, right?
Right. Right.
Although vinyl's coming back, but wore the grooves out of that album, and have a particular affection for that. Let's say over there are many other live albums. That particular album,
that's my favorite of their lives as well.
Yeah, definitely. It's a very warm sound. People used to say it sounded, fuzzy or not focused. I think it's actually a very well recorded, very warm sound.
Yes.
Great performances and really great spirit. First new album of theirs, though, that came out, I believe, is for me was Signals.
That's the first one I actually. Yep, that's the first one I actually got because it had literally just come out when it was suggested that I check the band out. So I started from there, and then of course I had to backtrack a little bit.
Same here, yeah. And that's a good starting point there. You have to start somewhere.
Yeah, I think at that point the keyboards hadn't gotten completely out of control yet.
Right. Although the reviews for that album, if you look back online retrospectively, they did get hammered from some reviewers. The articles have been saved, and you can read them in the Rush community. But you'll see they were just lambasted for the level of keyboard usage and how Alex was relegated to the back of the back of the heap.
Yeah, that
I didn't feel that way, but that's to me that's what Rush sounded like. It wasn't that much of a departure from the previous albums, but for those who grew up on Farewell to Kings, I'm sure it was a bit much.
Well,
but
sure.
For me, it was just fine.
Yeah. I'm a huge fan of Alex and his playing, and I do believe that there were times where maybe he was marginalized a little bit. Yeah,
I mean that period, certainly the album after that, and then the mid '80s, Hold Your Fire, all that was his role changed temporarily.
Right.
Then came, of course, roaring back, more recently.
Right. Yes. Correct. What's your favorite song?
Favorite song?
Yes.
I have a few, and for different reasons. My favorite probably would be, just emotionally, is from that album. It would be Chemistry, and I took one of my online moniker or avatar, or whatever, online name, if you will, was Music in the Abstract from that song.
Yes.
One of the lyrics. And
Right.
I use that as one of my, online nicknames or avatars.
Right. Yes.
And in the Rush community, so that was my handle, if you will. But I would say that was my favorite song. It was always the least favorite on that album for most people, but for whatever reason, it resonated with me. But as far as like their best song, or what I think is kind of encapsulates their sound, or
are you a big lyric guy?
A lyric guy? Yeah, I mean, I would say that's not how I approach the band, primarily through their lyrics, mostly the music, but not that I ignore the lyrics. But I wouldn't say first and foremost would be the lyrics,
right.
Though it's wonderful.
Yes.
But mostly maybe initially more from the instrumental standpoint. But something like Free Will, I think, just musically is pretty impressive.
Yes.
There's too many to mention. I like a lot of their newer compositions on their last, 3 albums.
Yeah, yeah.
Quite a bit.
Yeah, they did come back strong with Clockwork Angels. That was fantastic.
Very much.
I did
very
that.
much, and I feel that way. I'm
Yeah.
sorry, go ahead.
I went to that tour. I saw them at Jones Beach.
Great.
But,
you put on a great show, and
yes.
they cover so much ground. And this, I thought that even the last 3 albums, I'm sorry, Clockwork Angels, Vapor Trails, and then prior to Clockwork Angels,
Snakes and Arrows.
Blank. Snakes and Arrows. Thank you.
Yeah.
Very strong live. I thought many songs off that album were translated nicely live.
Yeah.
Working Them Angels, I think one in particular, Working Them Angels, was very strong live, stronger than I thought it would be. It was good tune, but live it worked really well. Interestingly enough, it just translated excellently live.
That, and I think that a Rush audience is more receptive to hearing the newer stuff in a concert rather than, like, let's just say the Rolling Stones, for example. Everybody just wants to hear Jumping Jack Flash, and nobody cares about the new stuff.
Yeah,
but with the Rush
that's
audience,
one of the things that I think makes them unique is their fan base, and that their fan base embraced whatever they did. So if they did something unusual, they might raise an eyebrow, but they still went along with it, and they still bought the albums, and they still went to the concerts, and they didn't boo them if they played a bunch of new songs. I remember I think it was Snakes and Arrows, they played the majority of the songs on the album.
Yes.
I mean, a remarkable number of the songs, percentage-wise, maybe 80% of the songs they played. And, the concert didn't lose steam, and the energy level was still high. The audience enjoyed it. I think that's one of the reasons they were able to persist as long as they did as a band, because the audience went along with them. So they're not going to certainly hold it against them if they're playing a lot of new material live.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. Let's see. So, what about your favorite album? I mean, I know what your first was. What would you say your favorite is?
Favorite one, I'd say, again, it's usually emotional reasons more than musical, but Hemisphere's Side 1. So
yes.
I remember playing that on the drums, learning it note for note, and kind of like if you can get that under your belt, not that anything's easy, but that's one of the harder ones. So once you crack that, you can kind of, learn your way through the other ones. So for me, that was just for time spent, number of times played. That album has a real nice, memories to it. And then of course the second side of that, La Villa Strangiato, right? That was another fun one to play too.
If you have time,
lots of time spent growing up playing to that.
Yes.
There are so many. There are too many to mention.
It's true. It's true, and we're big fanboys to begin with.
Sure.
But I'd like to maybe concentrate now a little bit more on Neil Peart himself. As firstly, I guess firstly as a player, like what elements of his playing do you, when you're playing, do you emulate any of the things that he does? Do they kind of make their way into your style, like either
Right.
subconsciously or what have you?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, you could probably go on and on about that because anyone who's played to his music, it looms so large.
Yeah.
There are other players that I play to and listen to and perform, their music either in cover bands or just playing to records with headphones on. There are other bands I would play to as well, but with Rush, it kind of like it infiltrates your thinking because
Yes.
with his drumming, I think one of the big differentiators is with his drumming, everything was very methodical in the sense that he wouldn't just play it, let's say, because it felt good. Although obviously, if you put it on record, to him, I'm sure it felt good.
Right.
But everything was composed. His music,
Yes.
his drum parts were quite literally composed. Where if he was going to do some flourish on the snare drum with his left hand while he's playing a beat, a rock beat during one of the verses, he might make the more complicated version, the very last verse, and he'd gradually build up and add little nuances and little more complexities as he went on, and everything was methodically added. It wasn't just improvised at the moment. And he apparently, from what I've read and you'll read online, is he did change that the last 2 albums or so, tried to get a little bit more improvisatory in his approach to performing the songs on record.
That might have
by
been
and
his
large-
later jazz influence,
Yeah, or the influence of the teachers,
Right.
Peter Erskine and Freddie Gruber both
Right.
probably, and I think it served him well, right? I mean, definitely those
Certainly.
are 2 great albums.
Yeah.
But I know for myself, just learning that style, his sound was very definitive
Yes.
style, but it wasn't just only his style. It's the way he would compose a drum part were the littlest of accents, accentuations of certain parts of the phrase are just very deliberative, very they might sound spontaneous, but if you know him well just by listening to so much of his music, you can see that it's very thought out.
Yes.
A lot of rigor in how the pieces are constructed. Although people who, let's say, don't like his playing or don't like him, they might say he overplays, but quite frankly, the drum parts of his are so well thought out.
And
that,
just integral to the song.
it's the way he wants it. It's intricate, but not too much. It's intricate, but restrained. One of the things I often say about his drumming and their music in general is that it's restrained, kind of like fury, like restrained
Yes.
elation. Like it wants to explode, but it's always kept under control. So there's an energy that always wants to kind of go out of control, but it's held in place.
Agreed.
And I think a lot his approach to writing the drum parts, I think, is the fact that he has everything carefully metered out and carefully chosen, adds to the tension, adds to the excitement, as
Yes.
opposed to being, if he was just playing spontaneously, yes, it would be maybe even more notes or sound more fluid, but it wouldn't have the tension, which I think is one of the main things that makes his drumming attractive, is the sense of tension and restraint. Although there's a lot of notes, there's restraint, there's composure, there's
Yes.
discipline in the drum parts.
There was always a reason for what he played,
Yes. Yep.
and it suited the song. Much like I was one of the other fellows that I interviewed for this. We talked about Ringo Starr first, and how what he did, albeit he not a great technician, was exactly what the band required.
Right.
Sort of the same thing goes with Mr. Peart, except for the fact that as opposed to playing what the band needed, he kind of changed the band into
Sure.
what they became. and then
Sure.
and so he was so much more
Definitely.
an integral and irreplaceable part of that band
Yep.
because of the fact that not only was his playing so unique and so informed the writing of the other members, but he wrote the lyric too. So
Wrote the
it's
lyrics too,
yeah.
for sure, and wrote the lyrics. And so when he's playing the drum parts, he knows. I mean, obviously, all drummers you would hope would know what the lyrics of the song are.
Right.
But he wrote it, so he, has such a grasp on where it's going and why
Right.
the lyrics are what they are. So he can add the unconsciously or consciously add the emphasis on the drums that need to be there for the lyrics. The other
Yes.
thing is it's a trio, so.
Right.
As a trio, just by definition, his drum part looms even larger. It's a
Absolutely.
third of the music,
Right.
and you can make the argument that it's more than a third because of how busy and integral his drumming is to the
Yes.
music.
Right. Yeah. It's not often that the drumming is part of the architecture of a song as much as that is.
Right,
It's,
and it
it's rare.
defines their sound
Right.
subsequently.
Yes.
When you hear just a few bars of their music, you know it's him drumming, and you know it's them.
Oh, certainly.
So it's
Certainly.
yeah.
What did you admire about him off the stage? I mean, look, neither one of us really knew him,
Right.
but he's one of legend, so we hear things from people that might
Sure.
have met him. And what do you think was a characteristic that you admired about him?
Well, certainly, just what a serious person he was. So I don't mean serious in his demeanor, but anything he did, to the utmost of his ability, 100% of his ability. So if he learned, was interested in bird watching, he learned all he could about birds and
Yes.
and their migratory patterns. And if he was interested in motorbiking, he learned everything one could want to learn about it. You name it, he was a rigorous but a very always enthusiastic person.
Yes.
And interested in many things, and maybe that's why I was attracted to him as a person, because I
Right.
have a lot of interests myself, and kind of for whatever reason, I find I know he was interested in stargazing, as I was, and
Right.
but the point is, he wasn't a trivial person. He would read voraciously. You hear stories about them touring in the mid-'70s with Kiss, and
Yes, and he's
he
with
was
a
the
book.
guy who
Yeah.
would stay in the room and read books while
Right.
all mayhem was going on
Yeah.
elsewhere. Just a sober kind of a guy, and serious, and you could make the argument, and probably is true, that he did more, squeezed more into his 67 years than most people squeeze into their 90 years if they get
Yes.
that
Right.
lucky.
Right.
So
Didn't do a lot of time
that's,
wasting. Right.
he didn't waste any time, and so admirable guy, impressive person in the variety of things he was interested in, and the level of expertise, for lack of a better term, effort he put into things. Just an impressive guy.
Yes. 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 As are you. I
I'll give you that $20 I owe you shortly.
How many?
I promise.
How many times did you see them live?
You'd think I would probably have counted that. I haven't, but quite a few. I'm going to guess, I don't think I've ever tried to tally it up, but I know I've seen them probably, every tour since they've been going that they've ever done, I've been to, starting with the I would say the post-Signals pre-Grace Under Pressure tour. So they had a tour, Signals tour, I guess it would be, and they
Right.
came out with 3 songs from Grace Under Pressure before the album came out. That was my
cool.
first. I saw to that tour, because it was my very first time seeing them, and probably, I'm going to say on average, maybe 4 shows each tour. So
Wow,
I don't know what that would be,
yeah,
but
you got me way beat on
yeah,
that.
probably. I haven't done the math, but I definitely would see them multiple times each time around, as I could, the budget would allow.
Yeah. Yeah, wow, that's
There are
yeah,
many who have
that's a
seen
lot.
them many more times than I have, for sure. But in the Rush community, online community, people who see them, hundreds of times.
Oh yeah, well,
Can't
all you
claim
had to
that,
do
but-
is see some of these guys on the dock Beyond the Gilded Cage, and
Yeah,
and have
exactly.
some of these
Some of
guys
them are my
tallying
friends
up the
from
number of
online,
times.
yeah.
Yeah, that's crazy. Yeah, I was.
Yeah, I mean, I've been to RushCon a few times myself, and are friendly with a lot of those, those other super fans who are on that documentary.
Wow, that's cool.
But I can't claim to have seen as many shows as they have, for sure.
Well, you're a busy guy.
Yeah, somehow they are too, but they manage to do it. I can't.
Well,
One of them was one of my buddies was on there who actually runs a RushCon and was I think she was one of Obama's art directors.
oh really?
And
Interesting.
yeah, Jillian, she's so there's a lot of different Rush communities. She's involved with a few.
Oh
of
yeah,
them,
I know.
for sure.
I'm members of a few of them myself. I'm not incredibly active in them because at this point, other priorities have prevailed.
Sure.
But
Yeah, we all have that, right?
yeah, yeah. But wow, yeah.
For a while, I was involved pretty heavily in one of them. Moderator of a message board and
That's cool.
that sort of thing, and have my own Rush Rarities website. I still have it, although I haven't devoted much time to it lately. But I have quite a number of rare recordings of theirs on my website.
Oh, that's cool. You know what? If you could send me the URL to that, I'm not too sure that I've seen it.
Yeah, it's rushoddities.com.
Okay, I'll have to check that out.
My site. Yeah, it's basically a collection of rare Rush recordings and recovered fade outs and hidden audio, like hidden drum parts, hidden guitar parts, rhythm guitar and bass,
Oh, that's
isolated
cool.
vocal tracks and that sort of thing.
Yeah. That sounds great. I need to check that out.
Yeah, I'll send that to you. Yeah, definitely, I'll send that over to you.
That sounds great. I guess the furthest effort I ever went to get something from that band would have to be when Grace Under Pressure came out. I had to get the album the day it came out. And so the only way, and I was in high school with no car, and there used to be a record store called Smitty's, a town away from
Right.
where my high school was. So lunchtime, I ran out of school, ran all the way down to Smitty's to go get it. By the way, it's raining. Went and got
geez.
the album and came back, and by then the jig was up because it took me longer than lunchtime to get back. So I did get a little, a little bit of hot water for doing that, but it was worth it. I got it the
boy.
day it came out.
Of course, it was worth
Yeah.
it. Yeah, you got one of the first to spin that album.
Yeah, it was,
Yeah, that was exciting. I remember that.
a lot of good
when that
ones in
came
that
out,
one too.
sure.
Distant Early
That was
Warning.
that was a different sound too. That album had a different sound to it than what came
Yes.
before, for sure.
That's one of the things I like the most about them is that there's a lot of bands, and God love them. Like if you listen to AC/DC, their songs are fine. They've certainly their sound has served them well. But
Sure.
if you had all of the tracks on all individual tapes, and you happened to trip over the rug and they fell down, and you had to put them in some semblance of order, would it really have mattered? With Rush out with Rush, you can almost tell just by the sound of it what album it came from.
Oh, for sure.
Because
Definitely.
there was an evolution there.
And that's what you're making a good point. That's what people look forward to. If they did the same, if they did Moving Pictures version 1, 2, 3, and 4 every year after year, and that wouldn't last very long. They'd lose the fan base, and the fan base is who it was because they were willing to, be surprised or have to maybe willing to play the album a few times before they got comfortable with it.
And to their credit, I don't think the band would have wanted to do that either.
Exactly.
They wanted continued growth, and to their credit, they got it.
That's probably why they went as long as they did, because they wanted to try new things, and they were all on the same page.
Right.
Trying something different.
And I guess maybe lucky enough.
There was years that I hope they. What's that?
And maybe lucky enough they just happened to catch people because of their personalities as players that were like-minded. And
Right.
that's probably why they did stick with them, because they were like, well, I liked these guys before. This may be a little different, but let's see what they're going with.
Yeah, it's always an adventure.
Yeah,
They take you someplace new.
Right.
For sure.
Well,
Their style. I mean, their style changed quite a bit and kind of sort of returned to a harder edged sound towards the end, but it wasn't a carbon copy of their earlier harder edged
right.
sound.
Probably by around
It was something
Counterparts, they
different.
started sort of heavying it up again.
Yeah, they heavied it up,
Yeah.
grunged it up on that album a little bit, but then got a little leaner. Test for Echo was a little leaner sounding, and then they got even heavier again after that.
Right.
But different. Each album has a different energy, a different sound, and even though it's heavy, so they never really repeated themselves in any way.
Right.
Which is I think a lot of fans would have been disappointed if they did a retread, kind of a rehashing.
Of course, right. And that's hard to do, too, when you have a 40-year career as a band, to not repeat yourself. Just by your own muscle memory, you'd figure some things might just kind of turn out that way. I mean, I'm also...
very little of theirs that sounds the same. Very little that sounds like it's, there might be one song I can think of that sounds like they maybe reminiscent of another song, but not really.
No, and that's so
very
rare,
unique
because
music.
there's a lot of other people that I am very that I admire a lot, and they'll do it on purpose. Sting has done it. Frank Zappa did it quite frequently. And by his own admission, he would retread some tires. Just because there was something that he really liked, and he wanted to take it into a different direction later. But when he did it, though, it wasn't just that it was a laziness or whatever. He just figured he wanted to explore a road again, like in a different way.
Yeah. Take it from a slightly different angle, but the same material.
Yeah.
Whereas I know with Rush, as much as their albums differed from year to year, you still always knew it was them, even if it didn't sound like the previous album. Maybe it was the musicianship or their approach to just their instrument, but you could always tell it was them.
Yes.
I mean, always, even without the vocals. Although the vocals were, unmistakable.
Yeah, the unmistakable. Yeah. But
and
regardless
that,
of producers too, because they did run through a few of those over the years too.
Quite a few.
So
After Signals, it was all different producers, pretty much every album except for one or two, and always sounded like themselves.
Yeah.
Somehow.
Tremendous.
Indeed.
Well, it was great talking to you about this.
Yeah, likewise.
I'd love to at some point, whenever you're down on the island, it would be great to see you. And have you come in and maybe we'll have some dinner or something. I haven't talked to you in so long. That'd be great.
I'm not there often, but I certainly could make it a point of remembering to do that for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Who do you have down?
Maybe play a little Rush.
Yeah, that'd be great. Who do you have on the island now?
That's like
Anybody?
It's like swimming. Once you do it, you can't forget how to swim.
That's it. Yeah.
Rush is like that.
But do you have any family left here?
I'll say it again.
You have any family left on the island, or is everybody migrated?
Well, my brother's still on the island, and my uncle, and my sister. Yeah, so it's quite a few.
Okay.
But
so you have a reason to come here other than me, then.
Well, yeah, I do, but well, we'll make sure that I definitely will make an effort to stop by for sure.
That would be cool.
Yeah,
That'd be
awesome. Well, thanks,
Okay,
Andrew.
sir.
It's been nice talking with
It
you.
was great talking to you. I hope to do so in
Yeah, thanks for
in the
having
very
me.
near future. Yes, and I'll let you
Awesome.
know. I'll let you know when this thing is all edited. There's going to be a bunch of people. This is going to be a longie because
Well,
I'm
good.
not gonna.
As it should be,
Yeah, I'm not going
It's
to
such
edit
an
out
impact
too
on
much
people.
content. Because everybody has their things to say. So
Sure.
I'm going to let it run for as long as it happens to run. If it happens to be 4 hours, I don't care. Because this isn't really
Oh, good.
monetized at this point anyway. I put this on my website for my students. I have, I don't know, I guess around 12 episodes right now. I only do it like maybe quarterly at this point. It would be
Okay.
nice to get into doing more of it. But, again, priorities. So whenever
Yeah,
I
gotcha.
can,
No.
I do one. But
That's good that you're doing it.
Yeah,
Yeah, definitely.
I
I'll shoot
really
you over
enjoy it.
that link for my website. I think you'd be interested in it. It's all
Oh, absolutely.
rare audio.
Please do.
Yeah, it's fun. It's nothing standard. It's all like, alternate versions of Rush songs live with like different lyrics that you've never heard. Or,
Oh, I can't wait to check
you
this
know,
out. Yeah.
recovered fade outs, like songs that sound a little different versions of songs. A lot of fun stuff. There's a lot of. I have some train wrecks, so live train wrecks. When things go wrong, I have that on there.
Oh, that's
which is a
good.
rarity for them, right?
Oh, yeah,
But there's
yeah.
a lot of fun content. It's all odd little outtakes and like I said, hidden audio. So like the Vapor Trails album, there'll be layers of guitars that you can't hear, but if you process the audio, you can hear these other little parts underneath the surface. There's a lot of that, so I think you'll find it interesting.
That's
I'll
great.
text it over to you.
Oh, that'd be perfect. I'd really appreciate that.
Sure. Andrew, thanks so much for including me.
Oh, I wouldn't have it any other way, So,
Thank you. Yeah, I'm happy to be part of it.
yes, I'm glad you are too. All right, Chris, and I hope to talk to you soon then.
Yeah, hope to talk to you soon for sure.
Okay.
Thanks, Andrew.
All right, so you have a great night,
You too.
and I'll let you know when this thing's up and running.
Awesome.
Okay?
Thank you.
All right.
All righty.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks a lot. Good night.
Good night.
Have a good one.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
You too.